Welcome to the Explainer. Today, we're going to talk about a conflict that was supposed to be a total sideshow, but instead it turned into a massive turning point in World War II. We're talking about the Greco-Italian War, the very first time the Axis powers really got punched in the nose.
Yeah, that was the big talk from Italian dictator Benito Mussolini. He was absolutely convinced this whole invasion of Greece would be a quick, glorious victory. His own parallel war to prove Italy was just as mighty as Hitler's Germany. Spoiler alert, he was about to be proven so wrong.
So, what was really behind this whole thing? What was Mussolini thinking? Well, let's get into it. It was basically a dangerous mix of massive imperial dreams and, well, pure ego. Okay, so at the very heart of all this was this fascist idea called spazio vitale, which literally means living space. Mussolini had this grand vision of a new Roman Empire, stretching all the way from Gibraltar to the Strait of Hormuz, controlling the entire Mediterranean. And for that to happen, Greece was a key piece of the puzzle he had to grab. And you can see why he was so cocky. Just look at the numbers here. On paper, this was supposed to be a total walkover. Italy had way more troops, a huge advantage in the air, and tanks, which the Greeks had none of. You look at this and you think, yeah, this will be over in a week. But, and this is a huge but, that on-paper strength was hiding a plan that was just full of holes. Just look at these miscalculations. The Italian command completely ignored the brutal, mountainous terrain. Their logistics were an absolute train wreck. Get this, they planned for over 1,700 trucks, but only about 100 actually showed up for the invasion. And maybe worst of all, they totally underestimated the Greek people's will to fight for their homes. And that massive underestimation, it leads right into one of the first truly shocking moments of the war, a moment of incredible national defiance. So picture this, it's the middle of the night, October 28th, 1940. The Italian ambassador shows up and hands Greece's prime minister, Ioannis Metaxas, an ultimatum from Mussolini. Basically, let our troops in or it's war. And Metaxas's reply was simple. Then it is war. For the Greek people, though, that defiance got boiled down to a single powerful word, oxy, which just means no, an absolute defiant no. And what happened next was just stunning. What was supposed to be this blitzkrieg-style campaign just fell apart in less than 2 weeks. Their elite mountain division, the Julia division, got completely surrounded and just torn to pieces in the Pindus Mountains. By November 13th, the invasion wasn't just stopped, it was thrown all the way back to the starting line at the Albanian border. Right, and this is the crucial part. The Greeks didn't just play defense. They didn't just stop the Italians. They completely turned the tables and launched one of the most successful counterattacks of the early war period. In this slide, wow, it just captures the whole story, doesn't it? The plan versus the reality. On the left, Mussolini's grand plan, a triumphant 2-week march to conquer Epirus. And on the right, the humiliating reality, his army getting chased back deep into Albania, the very country they invaded from. The Hellenic army just went on an absolute tear. They launched this incredible counteroffensive, and you can see the results here, capturing key cities one after another. Korcha, Saranda, Gjirokastër. That capture of the Klissura Pass in January was such a big deal that Allied commanders all the way over in the Middle East were sending their congratulations. And this number, over 100, what that tells you is how incredibly fast the Greeks mobilized. By the middle of November, while the Italians were still struggling to get organized, the Greeks had put more than 100 infantry battalions into the field. We're talking groups of about 800 soldiers each. They completely flipped the script on the numbers, outnumbering the Italians who had started with the advantage. But all this amazing success, it led to a brutal winter stalemate. The fighting just ground to a halt in those snow-covered mountains. This wasn't just a pause, though. It was this grueling test of survival where frostbite was taking out as many soldiers as the bullets were. And this war, the one that was supposed to be over in a flash, just dragged on and on. And now other major powers started to pay attention. To stop a complete and total collapse, Italy had to just start frantically pouring troops into Albania. And you can see it right here in this chart. They went from just 6 divisions at the start. And remember, a division is a huge unit, like over 10,000 soldiers, all the way up to nearly 30 by April. It was a massive reinforcement that did eventually stop the Greek advance, but it cost them a fortune and they couldn't retake any of the ground they'd lost. So then, in March, in one last desperate move to save face, Mussolini himself flies to Albania to personally oversee this huge spring offensive. For an entire week, 12 Italian divisions just hammered one single spot, height 731, and it was a complete, total failure. When a disgusted Mussolini flew home, his own assessment of the whole thing was just one word: zero. And this quote, it just says it all, doesn't it? This captures that incredible, almost fatalistic spirit of the Greek soldiers. They knew a much bigger threat, Germany, was probably on its way, but they were still determined to fight the Italians to the bitter end.
Okay, so why are we talking about this? Why does a conflict fought in some remote mountains in the Balkans matter so much to the bigger picture of World War II? Well, the answer is that it set off a disastrous chain reaction for the Axis.
Mussolini's mess basically forced Hitler's hand. He couldn't risk the British setting up shop in Greece. That would be a direct threat to the Romanian oil fields that were fueling his entire war machine. So, he had to do something he didn't want to do: launch Operation Marita, a full-blown invasion of the Balkans. This meant diverting critical troops and equipment away from his main goal. And for the Greek army, the very soldiers who had beaten the Italians, it was a total tragedy. They were now caught in a two-front war and were, eventually, overwhelmed. And the human cost of this campaign was just devastating. Over 6 months of brutal fighting, both sides suffered these immense casualties. And it wasn't just combat. Tens of thousands of men were taken out of the fight by frostbite in that unbelievably harsh mountain winter. So when you look at the big picture, the impact of this war was huge. It was the very first time an Axis power was defeated on land in the entire war. It absolutely shattered the myth of Italian military power and humiliated Mussolini. For the Allies, it was a massive, desperately needed shot in the arm. And, maybe most importantly, it dragged Germany into a fight in the Balkans that it never planned for and really couldn't afford. And don't just take my word for it. Hitler himself would later point the finger squarely at his Italian ally for what happened next. That German invasion of the Balkans, Operation Marita, delayed his master plan, the invasion of the Soviet Union, Operation Barbarossa. And that delay, which was about 5 or 6 weeks, remains one of the great what-ifs of World War II. Think about it. Did Mussolini's idiotic campaign, as Hitler called it, end up costing Germany the war in Russia? Did that heroic Greek stand in the mountains delay Barbarossa just long enough for General Winter to arrive and save Moscow? It's a question historians still argue about today, and it's a powerful legacy for a conflict that was anything but a sideshow.